And stupid conduct of the Yankees. This coming a little more than an hour after the U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis told reporters at the Pentagon that if North Korea were to fire missiles anywhere near Guam, it would be, in his words, game on. That, in contrast to more diplomatic tone coming from General Dunford, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who is now traveling in Asia and visited the Korean Peninsula. On a visit to the front lines of the North Korean conflict today, the nation's top general emphasized diplomacy and economic pressure over military action.
The focus today is on peacefully resolving this crisis through diplomatic and economic means. That is the focus. And I wouldn't speculate on what might happen should our diplomatic and economic efforts fail.
China, the North's primary trading partner by far, is now adding to that pressure, announcing a new ban on imports from Pyongyang. China's Ministry of Commerce announced that beginning Tuesday, quote, China will impose a complete ban on the importation of coal, iron ore, lead ore, and seafood. President Trump has publicly threatened trade penalties on China if it does not increase pressure on North Korea. Beijing has responded by saying a potential trade war, quote, has no future or winners. Still, the White House is doubling down on a firmer line against North Korea's nuclear program. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Defense Secretary James Mattis laid out the administration's approach in an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, calling for the end of strategic patience and beginning of strategic accountability. Traveling in South America, Vice President Mike Pence delivered the same message.
Successive administrations in both political parties have believed that negotiation and patience with North Korea would achieve the long-term objective of the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. That has utterly failed.
North Korea, however, continues to issue threats, warning that upcoming joint military exercises between the U.S. and South Korea, planned to begin next week, could spark a war. What matters, said the Korean Central News Agency, is that when a second Korean War breaks out, it would be a nuclear war. For his part, Secretary Mattis told reporters today that if North Korea attacks any U.S. territory, the U.S. would respond with military action.
If they shoot at the United States, I'm assuming they hit the United States. If they do that, then it's game on.
This after CIA Director Mike Pompeo seemed to be allaying fears of an escalation this weekend.
An attack from North Korea is not something that is imminent.
U.S. officials do warn that North Korea is making significant progress. One new study found that their advancement in rocket engine technology could mean that they're acquiring it through illicit Russian or Ukrainian channels.
It appears that they sourced an engine from a foreign entity, and they have successfully incorporated that engine into some missile bodies and have tested both an intermediate range and an intercontinental range missile.
Defense officials tell CNN that U.S. surveillance satellites have detected signs that North Korea has mounted what appears to be an intermediate ballistic missile on a mobile launcher. Dates, celebrations forever important in North Korea. And we should note that tomorrow is a key holiday, Liberation Day for the North, and those missile preparations could be intended to either mark that holiday or make a show of force for next week's military exercises. Wolf?
Yeah, between the U.S. and South Korea, the North Koreans hate those. Jim Sciutto reporting for us. Thanks very much. Let's bring in the former Director of National Intelligence, General James Clapper. He's now a CNN National Security Analyst. General Clapper, thanks very much for coming in.
Thanks, Wolf.
All right, so the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, supposedly has been briefed on this plan to launch intermediate-range missiles toward the U.S. territory of Guam. He says he would watch a little more of the foolish and stupid conduct of the Yankees. Is this just bluster, or is there a real threat to the folks on Guam?
Well, obviously, that's a great question. I personally think that this is more bluster. It is the classic North Korean propaganda verbiage that they typically use. And I do think it's important to bear in mind the circumstance here with the onset of the annual joint exercise held between the United States and Republic of Korea forces, which the North Koreans find quite threatening. And so I think it wouldn't surprise me if they did a demonstration launch just to convey the optic.
A demonstration launched towards Guam. They said the other day, as you remember, by mid-August, they might launch 4 intermediate-range missiles towards Guam, and they would land about 20 miles off the coast. First of all, do they have that precision, and do you believe they might do that?
I don't think they have that kind of precision yet. I wonder about their own confidence level to launch 1, let alone 4. So I would think at this point they would be staying away from aiming at in any direction remotely related to Guam.
We saw that story in the Washington Post the other day that they may already, according to U.S. intelligence estimates, have 60 nuclear bombs, and that they pretty soon will be able to miniaturize those bombs and put them on warheads on intercontinental ballistic missiles. You buy that?
Well, we forecast that their general line of progression here, and this is a forecast of 2 or 3 years ago, and now we're seeing this happen, particularly as they aggressively pursue missile technology. I won't go into speculating about the number, but it's always been a range of estimates. But I think it's clear that the North Koreans are very committed to achieving a nuclear capability, credible nuclear capability, because, as I pointed out before, this is their ticket to survival. This is deterrence for them.
They're not going to give up that nuclear capability. They see that as their insurance.
Exactly. I think it's very unlikely that going in, certainly, or our establishing as a condition for negotiation, you must denuclearize first. I tried that talking point myself and got absolutely nowhere.
When we spoke at the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado a couple of weeks ago, you said you don't consider North Korea yet an existential threat in the same way that Russia is. Explain that.
Well, if you look at the magnitude and sophistication of the Russian nuclear arsenal, which is comparable in size and capability to ours, there's no comparison between what the Russian capability is versus North Korea.
But you don't believe Russia's it's not even realistic to think Russia would start a nuclear war with the U.S., but a lot of people believe North Korea might.
Well, I think there's a big difference between, when you speak of an existential threat, there are actually a couple dimensions here. One is the capability, which clearly the Russians have, to wreak great death and destruction on the United States if they so chose. Don't think the intent's there. You have to also consider, though, that other capabilities they have, notably in the cyber arena, which are the most sophisticated threat that's posed to us.
Talking about Russia.
I'm talking about Russia, much more so than Korea. Korea is kind of the second tier and improving. But I think the ability of the North Koreans to launch a existential threat attack of that magnitude is just not there.
General Clapper, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll keep counting on you for your expertise in this area. Just ahead, we're following the breaking news as President Trump finally speaks out against hate groups after